So I've received quite a few messages with inquiries, and I thought I would try and answer a few of those in one video. In addition to that, speak a little bit about the various facades of the victim. We've spoken many times about the identities that we seem to believe that we are, and how we take those to be our truth. The victim seems to be one that is worn commonly by all these illusions of others. And what I find interesting about it is that we are very apt and able to find it in someone else, and for whatever reason, it seems to elude us when we're looking at it for ourselves. Yet this gift of life is so perfectly doing what it's doing that we don't need to question what is happening. We just need to notice that the story of what we believe we are will continue to come into our experience until we honor and notice that. If we're perceiving all these external experiences as having nothing to do with us and just thinking that they're arising randomly, then we're missing every beautiful opportunity to notice the story that's appearing here and now. The victim has many costumes and dresses up in many ways and is eluded because of this. The victim is the one who is ultra kind, seems to do much for many. They often are the ones that show up at every experience to help, to cater to fix, to resolve. They're often the ones that are sharing about how they've done so much for so many others. And yet what's often happening for them in the background is pure resentment. I do for everyone, and no one ever does for me. I'm the one that seems to always help. I'm the one that always seems to show up. I'm the one that always listens. And there's all this resentment. And in that, the victim gets to stay trapped in a cycle of being the kind one. And yet what's fascinating by this is that the only thing we're ever victimized by is the thoughts that are appearing to happen in the story of being a victim, or being too kind, or being too generous, or being too helpful. What's noticed is that when we're moving from a place of clarity, those experiences may be happening, but there's no believing of them. There's no biting onto them. There's no suffering in them. Because there's an openness and willingness to be acknowledging that those feelings are coming based on the belief of a thought. So what I mean by that is, if there's ever a movement in this story of Kelly where resentment is being felt, it's never about anyone else. The resentment can always be tracked to and tied to some thought that is believing some story. And it's never had anything to do with another. Not even once. The victim will lead you into this grand and noble place. And it's addictive because the victim's story tells you that it's the others that are unkind. It's the others that are disrespecting you. It's the others that are not leaning in more to life. And in that, there's this validation that I'm better than them, and yet no awareness that all of this is going on. Just complete biting of the story. I find this extremely irrelevant in a lot of the counseling work that's available out there. I think all of what is happening here is unfolding perfectly, so please know that I'm not saying that any of this is wrong. It's just a pure noticing here in the experience of Kelly that if we move to a place of helping others and it's done in such a way that we're believing that we're doing something for a them, we're missing the opportunity, and we're missing the ability to face our own stories of the me. Those who seem to get it and lead others to getting it get caught in the cycle of believing they know something someone else doesn't. And there's nothing special about any of this knowing, because it doesn't belong to anyone. It's just this beautiful space of allowance. What I love about the cycles, or the apparent cycles, is that they are that for a reason. They cycle, or they seem to return or repeat, because they're simply here to say, look, 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 look. And as they cycle around, that's the only story they're telling. Look, look. They're not asking you to believe it. They're not asking you to make it yours. They're just saying, see me. Do you see me? Do you see me? Do you see me? And if you don't, and you're caught in the story that it's about someone else, they'll run with that too. What's beautiful about these stories is no one has to own them. So there's no sale of the story. There's no marketing person out there that's saying, this is the story to sell. This is the one to get the people to bite onto. That's for us to believe. That's for us to design. That's for us to attach to. This belief structure that says that somebody's selling some story. A story of fear, a story of a victim. So I'll leave that there, and I think it's going to get covered in a little bit more in some of the queries. So let's see. Bear with me while I open these. A wonderful gentleman wrote to me, and he has a query about someday becoming a counselor, and began looking into training, and says that to be legally counseling in England you need to have qualifications. So he's done some research on the different schools of psychotherapy and counseling, and the problem that he has is that he can't fully commit to a school of thought that doesn't fully reflect what he believes about the universe and the afterlife. What types of counseling will allow for spiritual fluidity without prescriptions to define results without prescribed treatment techniques? Well, I think that's a beautiful question, and yet I ask you to hold this thought for a second. If I believed that I had to practice any of this life thing in any certain way, if I believed that I had to subscribe or prescribe or attach to some doctrine in any way, or that I had to educate in any way, what I recognize is happening is attachment to thought and outcome. This work that the story of Kelly does, this leaning into life, apparently with others, has nothing to do with anyone at all. And there's no certificate to this. There's no training to this. There's no prescription for this. Move into the work that seems to be calling. Life will open it for you. It will do it for you. When you notice resistance to what's being taught, and resistance to practicing that because it's against some belief system, what a great gift to notice that there's something being triggered. There are many doctors, there are many psychotherapists, there are many counselors who now speak openly, metaphysically, scientifically, in non-duality, without any fear of how it's going to impact. Life is always unfolding perfectly for us. The ones that are intended to apparently find you will find you. The ones that find you that don't seem to line up with your new core values and beliefs, they're there for a reason. They're to trigger what's so deeply attached to. This is an unlearning. It's not a learning. Before this whole unfolding started happening in the story of Kelly, I had quite a few people that kept coming to me, and of course everything is the mirror. And each one of them that sat before me would tell the story of how they wanted to become a certified Reiki instructor or a certified healer, and how they were trying to become psychic, and how they were trying to become clairvoyant, and how they were trying to be a medium, and wanting all of these ideas of getting to that. And what I recognized was that could only be coming in front of me because there was something in me doubting that any of this was happening, because I was still believing I was doing it. When the belief that I was doing any of this dropped away, all experience could fluidly move through this without any identification of it being mine. So I guess the long response to this is, you're still caught in the story of being the doer and thinking that you're planning this, and that you're making choice, and that you're obtaining education, and that you're seeking out something. And what I say to you is to relax into this thing called life. It's going to show you how this is unfolding. And just enjoy each person that sits in front of you, recognizing that they are you. The idea of becoming something in the future is painful because it's attaching to some story of a moment that you have no idea about, nor should you. This free fall into nothingness is always happening. We seem to believe in this story of, okay, I'm here and now I'm going down to learn, and then I'll land in this other place where I'll go down to learn, and I'll land in this other place. And those are just stories too, because the mind is linear and it needs to see some story of progress. How do I know where I'm supposed to be? That's where I am. If you have some desire to become something, counselor, otherwise, and you have some belief system that says that you can't do that without certificates, then that's the way of it for you. I don't care where you live. I don't care what your obstacles seem to be, because they only begin and end in the mind, in the thoughts, in the way that you're perceiving what seems to be happening. So let's see what other questions we have here. I had someone write to me who wanted to know the cocktail of medications that I took to commit suicide. They asked if I would share that. And the answer is no, I won't. And it's not out of any fear. It's not out of any concern. It's not out of any protection. It's not out of any disguise. It's not out of hiding behind anything. It's purely out of knowing, but it doesn't matter. When this whole thing first started, there was some concern about sharing how that whole thing happened for me, how it would impact those around me, how it would impact those in my family, how it would impact my son. What I've realized is that we are all appearing in this mirage in the right way, at the right time, in the right capacity. We feel like we're making choice. We feel like we're making deliberate action. We feel like we're the doer. We feel like we're the ones that are creating all of this. We even feel like we're the ones that are deciding if we commit suicide. The cocktail of medications that I took couldn't even be replicated because it was such a mix. But I will just say this, as I sit here today and I communicate as I am right now, there's nothing here that can even relate to that story that ever wanted to die. And I guess I'm just really grateful for that, even though I know I'm not the one that's perpetuating that. Let's see what else I have here. There have been many comments elaborating on abusive people and understanding how we would choose others to hurt us and understanding why we would want that as part of our plan. And again, that's a really hard one to wrap our head around when we're believing that we're the doer and we're believing that we're separate and all of this is happening to us. We really want to attach to this victim who's been abused, and we want to attach to these others who are abusers, and that's going to hurt every time. And we'll find apparent allies to back that story up for us. We'll find people who will chime in and say, yeah, that guy was horrible, or that was awful what happened. And yet I say to you, if you're ready for it not to be part of your experience, be ready to not get on the bandwagon with others who seem to live and thrive in the story of others being bad, wrong, simple. There's something to be said for this non-path being a very unique and individual one, and yet not special at all. We want someone to show us the way. We want someone to give us the answers, because we don't believe enough in our knowingness that we're not separate from any of it. So we tend to gravitate toward those who hold the same beliefs and conditioning and suffering that we do, until we don't. This is a solo inquiry process, and it is always doing itself when I get out of the way. When the story of Kelly isn't involved adding more thought to the experience, and there's just this pure clarity and knowing everything that's met with is it true is let go. Is it true that people suffer? Is it true that people are cruel? Is it true that people hurt each other? Is it true? Is it true? Can I absolutely know it's true? Why would we choose any of this? As long as I believe that I can be killed, murdered, obliterated, I suffer. When I inquire on that and recognize that there's nothing here that ever dies, that there is an eternalness that we can't wrap our linear minds around, when there is never this body, when there is a infinity and not even that's going on here, there's a freedom to allow what is to be what it is without any story around it at all. I can't remember. I thought there was another one on here that asked for my direct response quickly. I guess that's it for now. I just say this to you. Let the noticing do what it does. breathe into this moment and notice the thoughts doing what they do. Watch them as they dance. Notice what they're saying. And the more that noticing of an allowance of what is happening to do what it's doing, the more that openness fills the space. Intrinsically, we want to believe that we are the doer, the controller, the manipulator, the manifester. And we're so far beyond any of that. If we allow ourselves, or the idea of ourselves, to die into every moment, die into every moment, die into every moment, what is here is a recreation. And this now is never having to be obtained. It just is. There really is nothing more delicious than this invitation to no one for nothing. The busy mind misses it because it's so subtle. And the busy mind will busy itself until it doesn't. There's no teaching that's going to show this. It's pure noticing, nothing more. I think that's it for now. With much tremendous love to you all. Until next time, in love.